Welcome to Conversations on Resilient Leadership. I'm Jim Vries, founder of Enhance International Group, and your host for today's episode. This podcast series is where we dive deep into the minds of leaders who have not only navigated through uncertainty, but have emerged stronger, more innovative, and more resilient. Whether you're a seasoned executive or an emerging leader, each episode offers you unique access to the strategies and insights of top leaders who are redefining leadership in today's dynamic environment. Today, we have the privilege of sitting down with a remarkable guest, Mike Loveless, CEO of RAD and Vice President of AI and Analytical Business Solutions at intelgraph from the great state of Pennsylvania. Mike is an analytics professional that's been around in the SAP arena for over a quarter of a century. He's an entrepreneurial since childhood. He's lived in Germany, England, France, and worked for SAP in America. Mike has started and led successful businesses ranging from SAP bolt-on software companies to a US-based craft brewery, and from boutique consultancies to an AI-powered enterprise risk and resiliency platform provider. Today, Mike joins us as the Vice President of AI and Analytical Solutions at intelgraph, a Princeton-based solutions and consulting firm with operations in the US and offshore. Having the pleasure of working with Mike over the past 8 years, I can personally attest to his leadership, thoughtfulness, and teamwork. Mike, what I admire most about your leadership style is your passion, openness, candor, and empathy. Welcome to the podcast, Mike.
Thank you, Jim, and good morning. And I really appreciate the very kind introduction. Never really realized exactly how uncomfortable that would make one feel. I've never been referred to
why
as,
people roast you in a
I've,
positive way. There you
I've
go.
never been referred to at least not in a positive way, as remarkable before. But I really do appreciate the kind introduction. So it's
My
nice to be
pleasure.
here.
So, Mike, a little bit about yourself that you would like to share with some background?
Yeah, sure. When I talk about being an entrepreneur since my youth, that's true. I've always tried to create and build things, lots of failures, some things that ended up in small fires, but that's part of the innovation process, and it's the part that I have fun with. It's not necessarily so fun for the people that are around me. There's risk involved, certainly, but I started my first company idea when I was in college. And I also had worked for SAP, and when I joined SAP, in fact, right as they were about to release BW, I'd unknowingly come up with some other classmates in my new hire class at SAP America, come up with an idea that was competitive with SAP BW. And it was funny that we got an opportunity to meet with the president of SAP America, and we could not figure out how we got such an early meeting. And quickly, it was a shakedown to make sure that there wasn't a leak and that somehow we had gotten information. And once we made it clear that this was just our own idea, then we got very quickly shown the door. And I never saw the president again. But it's been a long journey. I've started consulting companies, technology companies, started a microbrewery in the US. So it's just a fun part of life, at least in my perspective. But again, not necessarily all that fun for the people that are along for the ride with me. So, but
Well,
that's
obviously with opportunity, if you want opportunity, you have to take risks. And if you want to come along that ride, you're taking a risk, but that's where the risk reward becomes really interesting. And if you are complacent and you just want to do the same thing, then you go work for a big company and you become one of the 10,000 people in the company, and then you try to shine above. But
sure.
Going out on your own and hanging your shingle, you're really putting yourself out there.
You are, and I can tell you it's difficult coming back into the corporate world when you've gone off as an entrepreneur to start your own things because you're used to running things the way that you want. And it's not the easiest thing. But, there are obviously lots of very creative people that stay within the environs of a corporate environment and they're
Absolutely.
entrepreneurs. And I think that there are a huge number of very, very capable and creative entrepreneurs that are innovating on behalf of corporations that would prefer to do that without taking that kind of ultimate existential risk for their own bottom line, but are still doing the same kinds of things. And the skills are parallel. There is definitely a risk appetite that will determine whether you're going to do that inside or outside of the pool. So it's
Absolutely. So,
not everybody
so
has that madness gene.
So obviously you became an entrepreneurial at a very young age, starting your companies. I mean, did you have anybody that you looked at and said, "Oh, I want to be like that person," or
Mm.
they really inspired you? What set you off in that direction that created that burning desire?
Yeah, certainly there are a lot of different types of people that inspire me. I wouldn't say that I have any high-end famous heroes because I really looked for inspiration for those people that were on the path but hadn't made it yet. So in many cases, people that are unseen. And I'm really inspired by work ethic. So people that are really working hard, that don't quit, even when odds are stacked against them. To me, that's somebody that could be leading a global corporation, they could be leading a nation, or that could be someone that works three jobs to keep their family afloat. I mean, as I've gotten older, I respect ever more a strong work ethic, probably even more than innate intelligence, because I think that you can be born with certain things and then other things you have to work really hard for. And so the people that inspire me are the people anywhere in the world that really do take seriously the need to work for what they get. And even if you're lucky enough to have certain opportunities or gifts, you still have to make the most of it or should have to make the most of it with hard work. And so work ethic is probably the thing that inspires me most rather than a person.
When I hear you say this, it sounds like tenacity to me. Is that a word that sums it up for you in some
Yeah,
way?
I think so. There's a fine line because certainly you don't want to be somebody that doesn't get a hint that
That's right.
things aren't going the
Doesn't know
way
how
that
to let go.
right, exactly. I mean, there is a point where sunk costs logic becomes a problem, and so you do have to identify when something's truly come to its end. But until that point, you really have to have the stick-to-itiveness and the tenacity, as you pointed out, to stay with it because a lot of times things that could work out haven't worked out either because you need to pivot your approach, maybe the timing isn't right, maybe you just haven't met the right partners or opportunities. So you don't want to give up too quickly, and therefore tenacity is important. You balance that with also being willing to recognize and realize when there needs to be a change, and potentially abandoning the approach. But
So another term that comes up quite often and for entrepreneurs is fail fast.
yeah.
How do you look at fail fast?
Yeah, I see two different sides to that. Certainly, from an investment perspective, you don't want to keep throwing good money after bad. And so the idea of fail fast is a good way to mitigate potential loss. At the same time, certain things do take time to evolve. And so you want to have, again, some sort of balance in the way that you look at or consider fail fast with respect to how you are managing your opportunities, your vision. Because again, if you pull the plug too quickly, and I think there are different places where this comes into play. Like, I hear hire slow, fire fast, different
Oh
variations of
yeah.
the same. I think that what it really comes down to is making good, rational, well-informed decisions and not hanging on to things longer than you should. But I think that depending upon who you're talking to, the definition of fail fast might be different. If you're talking to an investor, depending upon how much they've put in and how long it's been running, their fail fast point may come a lot sooner than a
Sure.
founder. And by nature, founders are always going to believe that it just takes a moment longer. And so that's a battle that you have between founders and investors. And there's not to say that one's right, one's wrong. There's a lot of context that has to be involved in the analysis. But I think that fail fast has its place, but at the same time, it cannot be a hard and fast rule.
So building on your discussion, you work with a lot of investors
Mhm.
and you have a lot of people that you have a big network. And so kind of interesting, as entrepreneurials, it's like, who do you trust? How do you size up the types of folks that you're going to, interrelate with to
Right.
build your vision of your company? And what are those characteristics of those people that you're looking for? And any advice you could provide to startups?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are your internal partners and your external partners. And so we'll try to cover each of those. When you're talking about investor partners, you need people that believe in you and believe in the vision. And there are different types of investors. There are those investors that are purely magnitude of opportunity focused. And so they're going to have a short leash and they'll have a quick fail fast kind of a threshold mark. You'll find other investors that are founder focused. And founder focused investors are looking towards supporting you as the founder to build on your vision, and they want to support you in achieving that. Now, there's still obviously limits, and they will have a failure point where they're going to have to pull a plug. But I would say that when you're looking for investor partners, it's really important to find partners that are willing to be in with you for the medium to long term, that believe in you, that support in you, and that vocalize that. That's not to say that, when it comes time to get into Series A, pre-Series A, they're probably investing more in the trajectory and the speed of achieving something. But in the early stages, when you're looking at angel and pre-seed and seed, the choices that you make of your investor partners can either make your life easier or it can make it harder. And so you need to be not only being interviewed by them as to whether or not they should invest, but you need to interview them as well and try to determine what's their motive. And are they friends of founders, or are they, even though they're putting in relatively small dollars, are they going to be really pressing you in a way that makes your life more difficult? Now, when you talk about internal partners, it's really interesting there because, especially as a startup, you can't stack your company filled with leaders. You have to have people that are doers. And in fact, you're probably going to be heavily built like an iceberg. You're going to have a lot of the doers down at the mid to lower end of the operations, and just a few, if not just one leader. But there's danger, there's risk in just having one. It's okay even if it's just one as a full-time employee, but you need to have very early on a very sage and seasoned advisory group. Because if you're stuck in your own echo chamber of your own head, you can end up having only one voice that's driving you strategically, tactically, operationally, and without really knowing that you're on the wrong path or considering potentially other better paths, even if the one that you're on is pretty decent, you may miss out on opportunities to improve or to increase just because you're the only voice you're hearing. And so I think it's really important to engage either with internal resource team members that believe in the vision that can provide a potentially competing voice, because again, just hearing the same message may send you to bed feeling good today, but maybe 3 months, 6 months down the road, you'll realize that you took a wrong path. So I think that that could be with employees and team members internally, but certainly can be involving an external advisory network. And so building that network out, potentially through your investment partners, potentially with people that you've worked with in the past, is really important. And groups like EIG are tremendous for that because it brings together long tenured professionals with huge networks, with lots of experience, with lots of anecdotes, and all of those things are vital. And so I'd say network building is really, really important. And that's on the financial side, that's on the advisory side, and that's obviously on the roll up the sleeves and get work done side.
That's a great summary. Thanks, Mike. And one of the things that I've observed in startups, my dad had his own startup company, and what I observed happened, what worked and didn't work over the years, you know, when you try to head the startup companies where there's one person running the whole thing,
Mm,
and then you have a startup company where you have a major partner where they're kind of like anti each other because they cover different spaces. You have one who's more the CTO, one that's a very strong salesperson, let's say,
mm.
or you have a CTO and somebody who's able to make it work out in the field, let's say. But you
Sure.
try to find that yin and yang leadership. And if you can find that, what I've seen is those companies tend to take off sooner than the companies where it's run by a single person. I just curious what your thoughts are on that.
I totally agree with that. I think that at the same time, you don't want to have complete oil and water in your leadership group because then you can end up just spending a lot of time fighting. But at the
Yeah,
same
that's
time, having the exact same skill sets and personality types and approaches may not actually serve a longer term performance and results kind of outcome that you'd want. I think that it's important to have people that have different focus areas. At intelgraph, I've been brought in to kind of be a rainmaker and to help build practice in AI and analytical solutions. But the leadership, and Vamsi Godavarti is a longtime friend of mine, and he's the founder of intelgraph, and we have different personality types. We share some of the same characteristics, but he's much more operationally focused. He's got a lot more focus on bottom line and achievable goals. I tend to be a visionary and kind of medium to long-term focused, and we balance each
mhm.
other out very well in that regard. And I think that that's an important thing for any organization, whether it's a service company, whether it's a product company, to have in your leadership. And if it's not even in leadership, you need that at a project level. I mean, within projects, you're going to have different personality types. And for projects to be successful, you have to have personalities that can coexist, but not necessarily completely overlapping styles, or else you run aground for the same reasons with everybody rowing in the same direction. So,
Yeah, I've found over the years is having folks with different perspectives,
mm.
but most important, you have the same values
Mhm.
and, integrity and respect, are some of the core values. What are some of the core values that you look for in working with folks in
Yeah.
building a team?
Yeah. So, do you mean leaders or do you mean collaborators, people that I'm working with?
For your organization, you're building an organization. What are
Yeah.
some of the core values that are your ethos of what you're looking to build in an organization, and how does that evolve as the organization evolves in the beginning, and then because you've kind of gone through. I think the core values should stay the same
Yeah.
regardless
Mhm.
of the size of the company. But if you have a different opinion, that's fine too. Open to your your
Yeah.
thoughts on that.
Core values have to be the same. Your approaches, your skills, as we've said, you need diversity of approach and technique and skill. But ultimately, organizations are made up of people, and people have to get along. And so I'd say one of the core values just has to be a human ethic. You just need to find people that are not selfish, not that they aren't willing to take a lead role and to innovate and to by the nature of what they're building get some accolade and limelight, but you don't want people that are so focused on that for their own purposes that they're willing to sacrifice team dynamic or team outcomes. So, you look to build a diverse team, demographically, in terms of experience, in terms of skill. But I think one key core concept is you need to fill the organization with people that can work with other people and that ultimately see themselves as something bigger than themselves, and that they're enthusiastically part of that larger entity or effort. When it comes to building an organization that suits people, I really like to build flat organizations. I think that creating too much hierarchy, structure, titles, especially if you're running an LLC, things can get pretty interesting because there's very little control over that. Intergalactic chancellor, you can give any name you want to people within an LLC. But ultimately, I think that creating stratified layers of an organization can put a chilling effect on the output, the creativity, the work pace, because people feel constrained. You need to have some hierarchy, certainly so that people know how to escalate issues and where to go to get solutions to issues that may be blocking their ability to get work done. But I personally like to create a flat structure and to really seek to engage people from the very earliest entrance to the organization to people that have been there the longest, to really try to facilitate almost town hall meeting types of environments where you invite people to become part of innovation. And if people are reluctant to do that just because of personal style, they don't like to speak out in a big audience, that you need to create some open channels that are maybe offline that can be dealt with in less of a public way, but really to invite everybody into the creative process, the refinement process, the optimization process, because tomorrow's leaders start today at a lower level of the organization, and they have to gain that experience. And there are a lot of things that they can bring just because of their own innate creativity or things that they notice. And if you inhibit that type of information flow, you're actually not only harming their development, but you're hurting the organization as well. And so I think that the culture is really important. And I don't believe in a lot of the buzz phrases that are out there about the importance of culture versus technical skill or anything like that. I think they're both important, but I do think that the thinking through and the establishment of an inclusive and open type of culture is a very important thing for getting the best out of people from bottom to top.
Yeah, going back to my old days, I think that we always try to drive openness and candor
Mhm.
amongst and create as flat an organization as possible.
Mm.
And we use the word empowerment. A lot of people have different views of what empowerment means. They think it means taking over the company. No, it means empowering the people to make decisions where they're confident and allow them to make mistakes and allow them to do it the way that they would do it, even though it's not the way you would do it, but it still gets the job done. And who knows, maybe it's better than the way that I might do it. And that's the way you grow that internal growth in your company and enthusiasm for people to tackle the tough problems, so that when you have that open meeting like you just discussed,
Mm.
they're going to feel good about speaking up because they're valued. So I
Well, and
think that
the
that
optimal culture, I think the definition of what that is changes. It's changing all the time based on tools and technologies and based on context. I mean, think about what culture was like in organizations before the COVID pandemic. I mean, everyone went virtual. Everything was using video conferencing, such as what we're on right now. And it changed the way that people communicate. It changed a lot of expectations. It created new problems, but it also maybe removed certain things that were inhibitors to the speed with which work was being done in offices. Look at what AI is doing. Now you've got generative AI that gets involved in reviewing work product, maybe coming up with originating ideas that helps with content creation. I mean, now what it's done is it's really placed more value on creative idea generation and then seeking to use the processing power and some of the reviewing capabilities of AI to support what people are doing in their day jobs. So I mean, I think you're going to see some jobs potentially go away. You'll see other jobs that would have gone away now morph into something else where AI is an ally to that role. And so it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the corporate and governmental working world and the cultures based on not only what happened in 2020, but also the future of AI and the relationship between human and machine.
Yeah, I view AI as an enabler
Yeah.
to get me to be able to be more creative in what I do every day, solve problems faster,
Hmm.
not not that it would get rid of the mundane work that I have to do in the day and create new solutions. And that's how everybody should look at it is let's get rid of that mundane work so that we can be creative. We can be working more on from an EQ perspective, emotional perspective,
Hmm.
than a mechanical perspective on solving issues. And so I think it's gonna be an equalizer where the people who are the most innovative people and the people that are most empathetic and wanting to work with others are going to be the ones who succeed, and less about the people who want to. It's democratizing solving problems.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. And I think that, your point is well taken. That there's even a cultural change that's going to have to occur as people get to understand the appropriate role of AI and no longer see it as a threat, but also don't over rely on it. It's going to be interesting the next, I'd say, 5 years, basically the remainder of this decade. So
It's going to be a crazy ride, fun.
yeah.
Crazy, fun, crazy. So, Mike, this just you've done a lot of things and obviously succeeded many ways. Can you give a turnaround story for us of something where you know, going back to our original theme of failing fast or failing and then turning it into something really interesting?
Yeah, yeah. So I definitely have a fail slow story. It's one where tenacity, stubbornness, hard to tell the difference between them, but sometimes it works out. I launched a startup company really based on things that I'd done and seen in the SAP world, where there was an opportunity in risk and resilience to build a platform that was granular, hands-on. We thought it was great, and we were getting a lot of great feedback, but ultimately we were seeing the market start to take off with other players getting funding, and we weren't getting that kind of funding. And so we were underfunded and just struggled our way through. We ended up kind of closing things down for the better part of 5 months, let everybody go and just waited it out. Didn't put dirt on the casket. We lowered it into the ground, but didn't actually put it down. And in that time waiting, we ended up through network connections getting some very, very significant players coming in that believed in the vision, knew what it would take to pivot and to refocus the product, the platform, in a way that would draw clients, draw partners, draw funding. It was exactly what I was talking about earlier, that it's dangerous to be in your own echo chamber where you're the only voice that you hear. By just having not put the company down, and then just by luck, and you have to have luck sometimes, having the right type of people come in, C-suite from Fortune, 500 type companies that have decided now to take on leadership roles in that startup. It's now restarting, and we've gotten investment and we're looking for the next round of investment, but we're lining up some very significant partners. And the talk is about a Series A in potentially 1 year. So it's one of those turnaround situations that actually came about not so much by coming up with a change in direction or technology ourselves. It came through luck and network, having the ability to listen to now competing voices, which we never really had inside before. And in my view, I mean, one of the things that's important about leadership is knowing when you need to step aside and make some room for others who can come in and bring other key facets of leadership. That's not a very comfortable thing. It's different, I suppose, and less threatening if you're a founder, because if you're a founder, you care about the trajectory and the survival of the idea of the company. If you're a CEO, a CIO that's been brought into a company, then if you're moving aside for somebody else to take on a leadership role, that's probably the end of your job. So it's really different depending upon how you are involved in the company. But as a founder, you definitely look at the opportunity to bring in those other voices, those other perspectives, their networks, their connections to funding, to technology, to resources, to partners. And those are major, major positives. And they can lead to turnarounds if you've got the ability to be patient. And in our case, one of the people that I've worked with down at one of the accelerators down at the University of Delaware, Mike Bowman, he calls it going into cockroach mode. So sometimes you have to go into cockroach mode to just survive. And if you can, this is the interesting part. There's fail fast, but then there's also hibernate fast. So if you recognize that the direction isn't working, you're going to have to recede, but you don't want the idea to die as a founder. Identifying that with enough time to retain enough capital to keep the lights on, and
Mhm.
then work your networks, continue to socialize the idea out in the market, build on that network and see if you can bring other key individuals into the initiative, into the effort, into the organization. I think that's crucial. And it takes a little bit of foresight and a little bit of navel gazing to kind of understand where you are. And rather than having to fail fast, hibernate and then wait for the opportunity to come back. And so when I think about our comeback story, it really invokes a lot of the different things that we've talked about.
Yeah, and I don't know. Seeing my dad he had like 20 patents, and he had a
Wow.
lot of different ideas, and of course, only one of them panned out of the 20 patents.
Yeah.
And it just reminded me of, you know, some of his ideas that he solved are still broken in the food industry today. He has a solution, but he couldn't sell it.
Mhm.
And it really brought into light to me is you could have the best idea, and it's timing and it's who you know and their readiness to champion it for a sustained amount of time to get it over into a commercial level of performance.
Mhm.
And it's all the things that you mentioned. It's you have to have the network, you know. It's like he got the buy off of these federal people but not the other federal people, you know. And it killed one of the things that is crazy.
Yeah.
And I just think that that's what's really I admire about entrepreneurs is you got to navigate that. And and that's what I heard is, you know, you need this to keep on going and finding other things to keep busy. So you always, I think entrepreneurs that I've seen, they always have something in reserve. They have another idea, whether it's a microbrewery
Yeah.
or, you know, something different to keep you going. And you could come back to, you know, making that original vision a
Mhm.
reality with the right team. And sometimes when you let go, you actually find more than when you because the tenacity gets away from you, like we talked about, and then you become blind. But when you let go, all of a sudden you can see.
Yeah. Well, it's a balance of emotion because as a founder and entrepreneur, you're investing a lot of personal emotion into something you really believe in. And you need that because that's what keeps you fueled when you hit lulls, when there are setbacks. And you take those setbacks very personally, and there's definitely a sense of emotional loss. And you have to fight against that on the downside a little bit because it doesn't help to be emotional when you're trying to pull your startup or your mid-level company through difficult straits. I think that you have to be able to detach the emotion from the logic, but ultimately you cannot shut down the emotion because it's that passion that drives you to continuously improve and to innovate. So it's a duality and it's taxing. I mean, that is an exhausting part
Yeah,
of
exhausting for you and your family and all your loved ones. You need
absolutely.
a good help network, don't you?
Yeah. I mean, my wife and I are empty nest now. Fortunately, it's not because the kids got sick and tired of the entrepreneurial stuff and decided to pack up and take a train. They actually went off to college. But yeah, it's not easy, and it doesn't make a lot of of fans at home. But if you really believe in what you're doing, you'll end up doing it, even though it's maybe a little foolhardy from a familial perspective. And you've got to be ready for that as well. That is
Mhm.
another consideration that you have to keep in mind. This isn't just taxing on you, but it's taxing on the people that are connected to you. And that may also change where your fail fast point is,
It
depending
is.
on the
Yeah,
entity.
you find that breaking, but listen to them. They know you best, is what I've learned over the years. They care about you.
Yep. Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. All right. So now we get into the easy stuff, the economy,
Right.
where we all have an opinion.
I think there's an election that's going to pivot on that.
Yeah, there's an election coming up, but when you look bigger picture, obviously the world is changing. Supply chains are changing. There's a lot of insourcing or reshoring or friend shoring as as a lot of people, a lot of different names for it.
Hmm.
But it's almost we are approaching, some people say, the new Cold War, you know, and but we're all interconnected, and there's no way we're not going to be interconnected in the years to come, because whoever has the greatest scale is going to own the mineral rights, so to speak, for the rare earths or for any commodity out there. And we know that that's China. And I think one of the biggest challenges America has is how do we keep up, overcome the scalability of China with innovation?
Hmm.
So, and I know intelgraph is working on some things, and I know that you have some ideas there. So I'll just open it up to you to share your thoughts.
Yeah, so with respect to where the economy's going, obviously there have been positives and negatives related to globalization over the past few decades. AI obviously is changing that. There's a new inflection point with respect to the economy, not just in terms of manufacturing, but also labor. I look at it as well and see that again, there are going to be some positives and negatives. AI is going to help the world be able to communicate really around all of the barriers that existed before in language, because now you can be able to use AI to write drafts of exactly what you want to say, giving it to it in your language, and it's converting it into the language that's desired. So you break down some of those confusions, those misstatements. At the same time, it does also beg the question then of where you're getting the value in that relationship if AI is driving it. So there are a lot of things that I think are still going to be defined and redefined based on the role of AI when it comes to engaging with, or I would say organizations, but more so nations that have been involved as globalization has really pushed a lot of the means of production out to other parts of the world, whether that's South America, whether that's going into Middle East Africa, going out to Asia. Obviously, these dynamics will change as well as the technologies that support supply chains and transportation logistics and business management start to adjust. Does that bring certain things back on shore? I don't know. Are there things that will move back to near shore? And obviously, near shore is a relative thing depending upon where your operations are. But and especially now, as you're seeing certain things happening with conflict in various parts of the world, where some of the extended and stretched supply chains are a point of risk. I mean, just recently we saw mobile devices that have somehow become used as explosive devices, and so that obviously means there was an infiltration somewhere in the supply chain or the manufacturing process. So I think that you may see some industries start to decide that it's time to recede back and to have a much greater tactile control over what's happening in their supply chains so that they don't become liable for those kinds of things that happened that heretofore no one would have thought about. Now, that's not necessarily just economic, that's societal, that's got a whole lot of different overlays to it. But I think that I don't know where this is going. I can't say where it's going to lead. I don't know how people and organizations and societies are going to adapt, but I do know that they are going to have to adapt and that the factors that are going to lead to that requirement are going to be evolving over the next 2, 3, 5 years. And so we may see a very different world than the one that we're accustomed to or the one that we were expecting. And it's going to be a point of differentiation, those organizations which are agile in their leadership, agile in their technologies, agile in their supply chains and value chains. I think that strategy and execution will have to be nimble in order to deal with the things that are going to be coming in the next years.
In this global supply chain, everybody's looking to improve their supply chains. And there's obviously a lot of analytics involved, artificial intelligence, and how are we bridging the data analytics to the artificial intelligence? And what are some of those major steps that companies need to make to bridge that gap? So maybe you can provide some background on how Intelgraph and RAD is looking at those things.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, certainly when it comes to AI, there's generative AI and there is predictive AI. You've got some different levels of AI and some things that, when you're doing certain types of advanced analytics, it's not even actually AI. You're using some machine learning algorithms. But creating your own AI or ML models and training them is extremely expensive and time consuming and requires a massive amount of data and also very good data quality. So you can't just plug and play. You can't do that just overnight. You grow into that. At the same time, the tools that are available out there through OpenAI, through Microsoft Copilot, through Claude, there are many that are out there now that are very, very good, and they are able to be API connected so that you can get some of the insights that are based off of your own data, but also including a lot from outside sources, news, and other feeds. The extent to which organizations can engage with some of those capabilities without going and building and training their own models, but leveraging the best of what's out there currently. It may not be trained specifically for what you need, but I've found that a lot of those engines, a lot of those models and capabilities are pretty good at evaluating based on what you provide them. And so whether you do that manually in a chat style or whether you're doing it through API, you can generate an awful lot of value early stage now from AI without being fully on the train in-house. So that you can take a crawl, walk, run approach to it. And when it comes to what we're doing in Intelgraph, for example, we have a supply chain control tower capability, a solution that we've implemented again and again for clients. And so it's become a replicable kind of a solution model, 80/20 kind of a thing. But for us, we see the opportunity, and we're talking right now with some other institutes about potentially creating pilots to incorporate that kind of API connected generative AI, not building and training your own models because that's expensive, it'd blow up your budget and your timeline. But there are things that you can do moving from crawling your supply chain control tower into walking, which is now utilizing an overlay that's API connected to bring in that kind of insight, that analysis, that perspective that blends your internal data, anything you're providing it as a prompt, and also the things that are accessible to those AI ML capabilities from outside data sources. That I think is the next frontier that we're looking to go into in some different pilot projects to really explore how that would look and work inside of a granular control tower. And I think in the future, as costs of training and building and all that around AI/ML starts to get more affordable and faster, again, because the tools are themselves getting faster at doing it, then you'll start to see a faster adoption point, getting literally from crawling right into running. And from our perspective, both for the other tech startup that I'm connected to, but in Intelgraph's perspective, we're going to try to take that crawl, walk, run approach because I think that's what most organizations are comfortable with, and that's what the technology will support at the current point in time.
So I'm trying to picture the control tower relative to a transportation control tower that's been out there for 15, 20 years, pretty standard out there today.
Mhm.
And the control tower that you're sharing with us today, can you kind of bridge what the difference between what they've done in transportation,
Mm.
bringing in all these different data sources on optimizing supply chain networks
Sure.
and bring visibility to rates and lanes and so forth that is now pretty standard in the control tower that you're talking about, and what are the major elements that you would be bringing in that control tower?
Sure. And one thing that's important to point out, and I think heretofore there's been mostly a focus on the supply side and specifically the transportation logistics side in the way that control towers have been envisioned and executed. But I think that in the future, you've got a full range of different towers that can be engaged literally across the enterprise. So you
Mm-hmm.
could have supply side, you can have logistics side, you can have internal processes, your plan to produce, your P2P kind of work
Mm-hmm.
stream. You can have order to cash towers, you can have
Mm-hmm.
return to repair towers. You can have towers really for all of the different areas of the operations of the enterprise. And so it's important to kind of identify what you're ready for, what you've got good quality data for, what it is you want to use the tower to achieve, whether that's truly just tactical, blocking and tackling kind of stuff, or do you want to use this for strategic? Do you want it for C-suite evaluations? And so depending upon the audience, depending upon the goals, depending upon the areas of decision making that you want to support, whether that's minute to minute, second to second decision making on routes, or whether that's more on trying to decide whether you need to come up with a strategy to deal with frequent late deliveries coming in or defects that are causing an increase in return rates in your tower that's focused on return to repair. I think that it's extremely important to really understand your scope and to allow yourself room to grow that scope and to do that over time. What we provide is a platform that is flexible, depends upon what the customer's got. If they have data in R2R and P2P and P2P and OTC and they want to bring all those things in, you can do that. On the other hand, if you wanted to just start with something that you already know and you're just now looking to AI enable it, well, that's one of the things that we're looking into doing as well. And so you really have to decide whether you're looking to go deep or go broad. And so you have to decide where the value and the return on investment is for you as an organization. And then you make your scope and your strategy accordingly.
So how does RPA and other hyper automation fit into your control tower approach?
Yeah, so robotic process automation is something that we do get involved with on the SAP side of things. Intelgraph does that as part of SAP Business Technology Platform. So RPA is certainly a part of that. It's not currently built into the control tower solution as we have it. That does not mean, however, that it couldn't be. It really comes, it's data. As long as you have access to data and you have good quality data and you set a scope for what it is you want to achieve, then that is something that you can include. And so, as we've done, as I said, the solution came from lots of different individual boots on the ground implementations of this kind of solution that we were seeing it repetitively coming up again and again and again, the 80% of it being similar. We decided to go ahead and build that out as a solution that we could therefore accelerate somebody's development of that kind of a control tower with the idea that it gets customized, up to 20% or more depending upon the types of data, the goals, and the outcomes that they have in what they're doing in a tower. And so when it comes to RPA, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. We haven't had it requested yet, but that doesn't mean that that's not coming. And as we said in the earlier segment, a lot is going to be changing in the global economy and in the way that organizations operate in that economy. And so as there's a desire to have control towers that integrates RPA kind of capabilities and information, again, potentially stuff coming from IoT, which is a
Right.
whole other area going along with RPA. I think that both of those could be areas that you'll see start to creep into control towers. And at that point, I wouldn't even really call them necessarily supply chain control towers. They are enterprise towers that have lots of different sub-tower structures that need to integrate. And you can share information from those towers up into a corporate C-suite tower. So you have visibility to the interplay between different parts of the organization's operations and activities, so that you can then train AI on that at first through APIs, but eventually with your own models to see where certain things happening in some parts of the organization in certain towers is now spilling over into other towers that have bottom line or human implications.
Great, great. So I'll try another area that I've seen, when we started, the HANA days and building the data lakes. Can you kind of bring us through from those days in 2010 when HANA came out and data lakes and where we're at today and what's different today than, let's say, 15 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, back in the day, there was an art and a science to data architecture and data warehousing, and everything was about structure and making sure everything fit into structure. And now, obviously, the first move was getting out of on-prem relational databases and then moving from that into the cloud and getting highly flexible, performant databases. But then the next piece, obviously, with AI is the ability to deal with unstructured data. And it's really changed some of the focus and the effort involved in creating analytical solutions. Everything has now become solution focused. You've got these tools that are so highly performing and can deal with different types of data. You still have to have the data, and it still has to have inherent quality to it, but you can start to use a lot of the latest technologies to get over the hurdles that used to really cause organizations, data warehousing groups, and reporting teams to stumble. Now the focus is on front-end user experience and usability and fit to purpose. So it's really focused now a whole lot more these days because of the things that you have with HANA, SAP Analytics Cloud, things that have come out obviously with AI-enabled functionalities, and of course what you've got over with Microsoft Power BI and the ability to integrate things from Microsoft Copilot. I think that you will see more and more of the focus turning towards solution quality and usability and performance from a user perspective, but not from a back-end perspective, because technology and tools now have advanced so far that you really can, not that you can't pay attention, but a lot less attention and a lot fewer pitfalls are there. So
So I'll build on one of those areas that you mentioned. I think in the vision area, I've seen a dramatic increase in capability of capturing movements of people, movements of, and and turning that into data,
mm,
which would basically you need a Cray or equivalent computer to do in the past. Now, with the new NVIDIA chips and so forth, we can do it much quicker
mm,
and real time, and we can create data basically out of thin air today
mhm.
that we never could before. How is that impacting from your perspective?
Well, it's interesting because that's the whole wearables technology movement, GPS enabling. To me, it's the human side equivalent of IoT. So instead of getting information from devices, your engine on a plane letting you know that it's starting to approach a wear point where it's going to need servicing, or potentially that a plane is going to need to be grounded for some servicing or maintenance. Or it could also be tracking people. And to a certain extent, I'm sure that's been happening in things that are ubiquitous in daily use, things like Waze, where you've got, obviously your phone is acting as your movement transmitter, and it's helping in Google Maps. It's identifying traffic patterns and where there are delays, and helping to identify on the fly alternate routes that you should take. I mean, those kinds of capabilities have been around for a while. They will be getting better and better. And the point is that kind of information can and probably should be start to be part of your analytics as an organization, because you'll start to know where you should or shouldn't be sending, obviously, your trucking fleets. But beyond that, you can start to make strategic decisions about where you need to have fulfillment centers, or where you want to move certain warehouses or DCs. So that is certainly part of that kind of melding of different technologies, the generative AI, the IoT, the RPA, the GPS-based wearable technologies. And of course, we worked together on a project at the Digital Manufacturing Institute, MXD, in Chicago a few years back, which was all about wearable technologies in the defense manufacturing industry. So it's been something that organizations have been focused on. The technology wasn't always there perfectly to be able to do it, but it's getting there rapidly. And so I think you're going to see more of that harmonization of different data types and data sources to create holistic, comprehensive, real-time pictures for decision makers to be able to make their decisions based upon.
So it all comes down to being faster than the other person who's with you, while you're both being chased by a bear, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the goal now is know where the bear is beforehand and don't be there. And so
that's that may be it. Yeah.
that's
I mean,
proactive resilience. The
yeah,
mistake is
proactive.
people think of resilience purely as how fast you can recover from just and from its core. When you think of resilience, you think of a ball being kicked and it gets indented on one side, and how long does it take for it to fill back to its shape? And I think people tend to, and organizations have tended to think of resilience in that way as well. How fast do you bounce back? But, using the bear analogy, why be in that part of the park? You should use information and AI to become proactive and be in a different place than the disruption, or be prepared for the disruption exactly when it happens. You're just failing over to another part of redundancy because you've already wargamed this. You've already identified what the impacts would be, the potential likelihood of occurrence, how long it would take you to recover. You identify how big a piece of your organizational pie, whether that's revenue, whether that's mission, whether that's budget, intelligence, whatever your value metric is. It's really important that you really take seriously the organizational value of proactive resilience. It is not good enough to just say, wow, we bounced back, got up off the mat so quickly after that punch to the jaw. You need to find a way to be in a different place than that swing. And that's, I think, where the future of resilience is going to come about. And I think technologies and tools are out and are coming out and are evolving that will allow that to be not the exception, but rather the rule of how organizations will operate.
Well, Mike, this has been enjoyable talk. I really enjoyed learning about all the great things that you're doing as an entrepreneurial, and that you're driving resilience, but control tower and visibility. I appreciate your thoughts and your time today. And you have any closing thoughts for us?
No, just want to thank you, Jim, for including me in this. I think this is a really valuable set of conversations that you're going to have on resilience, on leadership. I love these kinds of podcasts because, as I mentioned, you get in your own echo chamber, and your advisors don't have to be people that you see real time. I mean, if you get good advice from others that have gone through things that you're going through or that you may go through, you can learn an awful lot through these types of conversations. And I really appreciate what you and EIG are doing in creating this platform. And I'm really excited to see some of the future podcasts that are going to come out with other leaders who've had different experiences and some of the same, because there's definitely a cognitive community that leaders need to create. And I'm excited to have had the opportunity, very thankful, appreciative that you gave me this chance, and I'm looking forward to seeing what else comes out in this series.
Well, thanks so much, Mike. Your input is invaluable, and your insights and learnings, and I really appreciate your openness to share with us all.